Thank you. Welcome everybody to the Audit and Risk Committee, and welcome anyone listening via the audio webcast, if there is anybody out there. We still have a vacancy on this committee, but hopefully by the next meeting, the seat will have been allocated and we'll have a new member joining us. To the agenda, I have had a request from the monitoring officer that we change the order of the agenda in that item 9 comes before item 7. Apologies to the Director for Resources for that, but I had agreed that that was okay. Thank you. So, Tom, apologies. Have we had any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Baines has given notice that he may be unable to attend the meeting, so if he isn't able to attend, I will record his apologies in the minutes.
Thank you. Item number 2, the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 28th of September. I'll propose them for the chair. First of all, does anyone have any comments or notes of anything on those minutes that aren't correct or inaccurate? No. So I'll propose them from the chair. Do I have somebody to second them, please? Thank you, Councillor Beggy. All those in agreement with agreeing those minutes? I think that's unanimous.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you, Tom. There was a couple of items on there. I know we don't specifically have matters arising, but we should probably note that under item number 8, the statement of accounts were actually signed off on the 14th of October and have now been published on the website. And the recommendation to full council for the external audit arrangements was actually taken to full council and agreed. On item number 3, members are invited to declare any disclosable interests. Are there any declarations of interest this evening? Is that a head shake from everybody? No, thank you. Item number 4, to receive any petitions, deputations, questions from members of the public in accordance with the provisions of Procedural Rules 93 and 94. Tom, have we had any deputations or questions come in?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. And item 5, to consider any questions received from members of the council in accordance with provisions of Procedural Rule 95. Tom, do we have any received?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. And item number 6, any notices of motion from members under Procedural Rule 97. Do we have any of those?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. So, having agreed that we could take number 9, Constitution Review, now, I will hand over to the Interim Monitoring Officer to present this item. Thank you.
Good evening, members, and thank you, Chair, for moving my item up. It's item 9 on your agenda, members, on page 63 in your papers. And the reason I'm bringing the report to you is because at the moment, under the Constitution, this committee is responsible for oversight of the Constitution. The Council's Constitution was originally adopted in 2003, and it's been updated, revised, had bits added to it over the many years, and it is in need of a review to ensure both compliance with legislation, which directs what you must have in your constitution, and there is an ongoing obligation on the council to keep the constitution up to date. As members will be aware, there is a cross-party constitution review working group which has met to consider this review, and we've put some terms of reference together, which are in paragraph 6 of the report, and a programme to carry out the review. I have to say the programme is ambitious, and it would see any changes that we wanted to recommend going to council in April in time for the annual meeting in May. The first phase, Chair, is to do what I'm calling a health check. So there is a direction that we have to comply with, which has 26 aspects. And what I'm doing is just measuring the Rutland Constitution against each of those aspects to see if there's any gaps. along the way, I am discovering reference to legislation that's been updated or repealed, which we need to deal with. And there are lots of parts of the Constitution which have been added, which don't need to be there. And consequently, what we've got is a huge reference tome. I think I counted the pages, nearly 400 pages, which make it a very unwieldy document. I mean, it's not the sort of document you would read from start to finish, but it's very hard to navigate it. And I say that, you know, someone coming new to the council, when we're in meetings, you often will see me flicking through the Constitution, trying to find the relevant standing order or rule that deals with debates or whatever, because there's no index at the moment. So I think there are some things we can do to the forms and structure of the document quite quickly, and then I'll be suggesting some other improvements. The other aspect I've been asked to look at is the scrutiny function at Rutland, and that would be the subject of a second phase, which would report later in February. And to inform the review, we've already started a survey, Chair, of all members of the council and senior officers, just to get some preliminary views from members as to, you know, whether they think we've got the purpose of the Constitution right. It's based on a modular form, which I think creates some complications in terms of what the document is for. But we also want to ask members about ideas they may have to improve, particularly public participation, petitions. I mean, I noticed that we very rarely get public questions at committee, for example, particularly the scrutiny committees. So I think there is some work to do to improve the way in which the council's operating. So I'm very happy to take questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I open that up to any questions for anybody? Councillor Beggy.
Just a quick one, Marie. Looking at the timetable, as you say, it is very ambitious. Is it at all realistic, April being 3 or 4 months away with Christmas in between?
Well,
are we making a rod for our own back here?
Well, I've almost completed the compliance check. So the working group are going to have quite a big report to read in January. And at the moment, they only have 2 meetings, one in January and one in March, but they are happy to meet more frequently if we need to. And certainly when I've done this before, we've had some weekly meetings, just so you can keep it in your head. It depends how radical the group want to be. I think if we're just going to stick with a compliance check and some editing improvements, it is doable. But if we want to completely rewrite standing orders or make some significant changes to the committee structure of the council, then it may be more ambitious.
Do you have a view on which route we should go down, Marie, at this point?
I think it's not a bad constitution. I have to say it's well written, but it just hasn't been looked at it in the whole. I think that's what's suffering. So I think the former, a light touch compliance review. I think there's a debate to be had about the scrutiny function, which Chair, I wouldn't necessarily want to go into in this meeting. But I think you have got some options as a council. You're running 3 committees and a commission. That's a lot of scrutiny activity. And I'm not seeing reports coming through from scrutiny up to council or cabinet with recommendations. I'm not quite sure why that is. So we've got a lot of activity, but not necessarily a lot of outcome. Maybe that's harsh, but that's just an initial impression of the scrutiny work at the moment.
Thank you, Mary.
No, thank you. And I think it's always good to have you, with your experience, fresh pair of eyes on things coming into review. But it's good to hear that it's not a bad constitution.
No, it's not bad. No.
Okay. Has anyone else got any questions? Councillor McCartney.
It's not really a question, it's more a comment in agreement with this. I think we have to, 2 things. When I took part in the peer review, which was nearly 2 years ago, the one thing that came out of that was that all councillors were advised that you need to know your constitution inside out. Now, I've got a copy of it at home and it is bloody unwieldy and it is awful to try and use or read. And I had some sympathy with Councillor Toseland when she stood up in her first council meeting and said that she didn't really, might not have been council, it might have been a subsequent meeting when she said she just couldn't cope with the constitution. It was next to impossible to read. I think the only thing I would add is that indexing, as you say, Marie, would be really helpful.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if bits of it are unwieldy, if you can find them easily.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think, you know, a top-down rewrite would be a very big project to undertake.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it would, yeah, I think, you know, you're right. It probably needs tidying up. You'll know what needs tidying up better than we will. So I think, yeah, you've come and had a look at it. Thought this needs tidying up. Let's do it. I think that's a great idea. I think if we can index it as well, even better.
Yes. I mean, you've got, I think, 9 sets of procedure rules. You've got 11 codes and protocols. You've got, you know, you've got a lot of things that you don't strictly need. And I think we could strip some of that out so that the things you do need, like, you know, I still call them standing orders, but meeting procedure rules are easy for members to access. You know, rules of debate are very clear to access, and possibly a few sort of, you know, flow diagrams to show how, you know, motions are debated or how all the committees fit together. Because some people quite like pictures as opposed to lots of text, and it's very wordy at the moment, and that makes it difficult as well for the public to access as well. So I think, going back to Councillor Beggy's point, I think, you know, a light touch compliance check and then some editing improvements is certainly doable.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask, Marie, how many replies have you had to the survey? I think it closes on the 6th of December, because it would be really good if all councillors were encouraged through the group leaders maybe to make sure that you've had a reply. Well,
I looked last week and we'd had 12, which I didn't think was bad actually. But it would be good to get, you know, more than 50%. So I could do a reminder with your blessing, Councillor Powell, if I could say, Chair of Audit has asked me to remind you all.
And maybe do that to all councillors, but actually also encourage the group leaders to make sure that their members have replied. Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you, Chair. I just really wanted to, it's a comment, I suppose. I just really wanted to welcome the fact that scrutiny is going to be reviewed, and particularly the Scrutiny Commission, which I welcome the scrutiny review, is really what I'm trying to say, and I wish you all speed on that. The sooner the better, as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. One other point I just wanted to make, obviously in the Constitution, as it's come to this, is the fact that audit and risk have an oversight of the Constitution, and also the audit and risk terms and reference are in the Constitution, and just a confirmation really that will also be as part of your review, that reporting, because we don't want to have too many reports going to audit and risk or committees. We need to be quite efficient on this, because audit and risk actually hasn't had practically done reviews of the Constitution. It's been with the working group, but we just a clarification of those lines of responsibility.
Yes, I mean, I think what I'd be suggesting is that Audit Committee takes responsibility for the contract procedure rules and the financial regulations, and that any change, you know, significant changes to those should come up. I mean, I haven't discussed this with the director, but would come up with his advice to the Audit Committee. What I've seen done well elsewhere is that the Constitution Working Group becomes a sort of a standing Constitution Commission that meets at least once a year. And the way it's running at Rutland, it is effectively a committee. I think it is politically proportionate, and you have got members who are interested in the Constitution and willing to put, you know, the time in, the homework in, to become familiar with it as a document. So I think what I'd be recommending is that we give the Constitution Working Group some status as an advisory body to the council, and you know, not give it, you know, but perhaps call it a commission or a committee as opposed to a working party. And that group of councillors would then meet at least once a year with a monitoring officer to make sure that the Constitution is kept up to date. And we would take that oversight role away from the Audit Committee. Apart from,
so you will clarify the Audit Committee's role in that, and also our terms of reference, which I think we thought needed a bit of a review as well.
Yes, we can do
as
that
part of that review. Thank you. Are there any other questions on this item? So we're asking that this committee is asked to approve the terms of reference that you set out for in the report for the Constitution Working Group, and refer this report to council. So this has to be approved by council. Refer this report to council for approval. Could I have a proposer for this recommendation? Councillor Brown, thank you, and a seconder. Councillor Beggy, I think, just picked the post there. All those in favour, if you could raise your hand. Thank you. Any against? None. So can you just confirm that, Tom?
Yes, unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Marie. So, are you leaving us now?
If that's all right, yes, please.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And we'll go on to item 7 on the agenda, which is the risk management report from Sava's Director for Resources. Over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the risk management report covers 2 things which I suggest we take separately. So there's a section on the updated strategic risk register, which I think we should take first. And then once we've done that, we'll talk about the review that Rachel's team have done on our risk management arrangements, and we'll talk about how we respond to that report and the proposed way forward that's set out, the suggestion that's set out in the report itself. But let's deal with the updates to the strategic risk register first. So Appendix A, the dashboard, talks about the key changes since we've last met, and I've spent time with each director going through each of the risks, and then as a collective, SMT has been through the risk register and looked at the relative scoring of each risk. I'm not proposing to say too much more, actually. Members are familiar with the risk register. I'm happy to go straight to questions on any of the risks, the scores or anything else pertaining to the risk register. There's nothing particularly that I want to say in addition to what's already in the dashboard. So happy to take questions.
Thank you. And I think it's really, I find it really useful to have that diagrammatical presentation of the risks and which risks are in the top right hand corner with red as I think that's very useful on page 35. Oh yes, open to the committee then. Does anyone have any specific questions on the strategic risk register? Councillor Beggy.
Just one, sorry if my papers have gone all out of order, but I believe this is pertinent at this point. Just a point of clarification, please, Sav. Looking at the risk dashboard in Appendix A, we've got the Brexit risk and risk around long-term impacts have been absorbed into BAU. I'm just interested how long-term effects of COVID can be BAU when you don't know what potentially risks from COVID, such as the new variant coming up, could be.
Yeah, I think the point there was when we had a recovery plan in relation to the pandemic, and there were certain things we were monitoring. So, for example, things that are pertinent to my world. So Andrea's team in Revs and Bends were monitoring the position on debt recovery and whether people, particularly regarding the end of furlough, whether there'd be a longer term impact of people's finances suffering. We started to see a reduction in collection rates, more people requesting crisis fund. And so we were able to say that we don't need to specifically monitor that for the purpose of the pandemic. We can monitor that on an ongoing basis. And in John's area, for example, when we're looking at issues around mental health and the impact that lockdown and other things may have had on people, you know, we have indicators, if you like, of whether we're getting increased demand and trends. So really what it was about was saying that we have enough going on in the business to identify if there are issues. You're quite right, whether we can attribute any issue specifically to, for example, mental health, whether we can attribute that to the pandemic or not, I think there's arguments about that we could do it, but I think there's enough going on in the business to understand changes in what's happening in our communities that we could then look and see how we respond to. And that's why we took the decision we took.
Thank you, Sav. That's very clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Councillor Paul. A couple of points, more for explanation than anything else, Sav. On page 16, Resilience Partnership. Who or what are they? I've tried to Google them today, but I can't find anything other than Scottish.
Yeah, we're in, it may be my terminology, we're in our LLR, Leicestershire, Leicester and Rutland, we have the Resilience Partnership effectively deal with emergency planning matters, and we buy into that partnership, and then we have basically an emergency planning officer that is aligned to us, and they have provided lots of support during the pandemic in particular, and coordinate a lot of the activity around LLR. And we have used them to look at, clearly the link to emergency planning is fairly obvious, but we're looking to see, so they're looking to their support to advise us on business continuity matters. And as you can imagine, around the patch, everybody's looking at business continuity to see what lessons we can learn from the pandemic, or, well, in particular, addressing new issues like things like cyber, which is certainly, more prevalent than they were before. So that's what LLR is, Gordon. It's the unit that we work with in Leicestershire for emergency planning.
Okay, thank you. That's a very useful explanation.
Did you have a second question, Councillor?
I do. Sorry, I've got.
Carry on.
Chair. On page 27, my account. Good to see you've got 1,200 registered users so far. Just out of interest, how many councillors have we got? Do you know offhand, or could we find that out?
Well, I'm sure I could ask Andy to have a look at that. I don't know off the top of my head. I couldn't answer that.
Again, it's similar to the issue we're talking about in terms of the survey for councillors on the constitution. I would expect all councillors to be part of that.
We could survey this committee, Councillor Brown, and see how many members of this committee. In fact, there we go. Oh, see me after school, Miss McCartney, isn't it? But no, but that looks quite promising, doesn't it?
It does, very good.
That looks quite promising. Yeah, pleased to see that, actually, genuinely.
Yeah, I'm sure that a link will be sent to Councillor McCartney later this evening.
I can confirm that Councillor Paul Brown also doesn't have a member's mark account. Really use a keyboard.
No, it is useful. Lots of people are using it, so it's great to see. And just as an update there, if I may, we are the latest round of green waste registrations will be done by the My Account. So we're expecting to see a massive uplift in the number of registrations. We're going to probably go to 7,000 to 8,000 in the space in a very short period of time, 2 or 3 months. And I think for us in our community to have 8,000 people there online, being able to tap in and do stuff, I'm really hoping that will make a difference to us in terms of the way people engage with the council going forward, particularly as we roll out more things on it. Advert over.
And then I think my final question is on page 32. It's probably not for this committee as such, maybe for scrutiny, GR scrutiny, but your final comment was worrying in terms of risk. There are also concerns about whether delivering a series of long-term projects realistically deliver the type of transformational change programme the council needs and whether the council has capacity to do so. That's a worrying statement, given that we need to deliver those savings over the next couple of years. So I just note it rather than commenting on it. Bring it to members' attention.
I'm happy to explain why I've said that, if you wish me to do so.
I think that would be useful as that's been raised now. Sav, thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things that's been very clear to me, or my perspective, is, there's been lots of things that we're doing this year as a council. Obviously, massive things around COVID, a number of very key projects going on around waste, leisure, highways. We've had the local plan. And, you know, we don't have unlimited capacity as a council, and to drive some of the changes that we need through, we definitely need capacity. We also need expertise, and we also need independence. And in some of the things that we might do in the future, and I don't want to speculate too much about that, you know, I do think that we will need to bring in some external capacity support and some independence. And I, for one, you know, I for one think that is absolutely necessary. That will be debated in due course, no doubt. So no doubt about that. But I think if we're going to deliver that transformational change we need, then I do think we need that independence, expertise, and that capacity as well. If you're leading a directorate like I am, there is a limited amount of capacity you have available to do things. And I think if we have to make a lot of changes in a short period of time, we will need to boost that capacity. That's my view. That will, of course, cost us money to do so. But from my point of view, if you were to ask me, would I spend, you know, £750,000 to take out 2 million permanent costs out of our budget, I'd write the check out tomorrow, because to save £2 million on a recurring basis, I would pay a significant sum for somebody to come in and deliver us that. Of course, these things are not without risk. But I'm glad, Councillor Brown, you've picked up on the comment, because I do think we're reaching a period now, and we'll see what the settlement brings us in a few weeks. I do think we reach a period whereby if we're going to really accelerate and right-size our business, take costs out, we have to be open-minded about bringing in support, albeit with all of the nature of the risk that causes. But, you know, that will be a debate for another time.
Thank you. Useful.
Okay. Thank you. Is that okay, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, fine, thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Beggy.
Thank you, Chair. I haven't got the same page numbers as everybody else. I'm looking at mine on.
Nor have I, actually, Councillor Beggy, so that helps me.
I'm on Appendix C. Are we covering that off currently?
We're not at the moment.
No.
Okay, I'll come back to you then.
Right, okay.
Okay. I just wanted to ask one item of clarification, and I'm glad that Councillor Brown asked about the resilience partnership, because I thought first when I was reading it was my initials that I'd done all sorts of things, but obviously I hadn't. Just a point of clarification, it was on page, well, it was risk number 76 about the SEND costs.
Yeah.
Page 22.
Yes, got that.
Action
Yes.
closed, and it refers to, I mean, you might want a service level agreement being drawn up.
Yeah.
Will and so my question was, has that been done? And if it hasn't, why is that action being closed?
The action was,
or is it no longer a risk?
Yeah, the action was around the review of DSPs, the designated school provision, which was completed, and the development of a service level agreement was something coming out of the review. I do believe that has been done now, actually, but that was why it was closed, because the DSP review had been completed. It may have led to no further actions. It has led to an action, which is clear. It was being progressed when I did this, but I do believe that has been done now.
Okay, could you just confirm separately that has been done, or can somebody? The service level agreement has been completed. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Councillor Ainsley.
Yeah, thank you. It actually is also about item 76, the SEND recovery plan. I know that currently the SEND recovery plan, the savings are being overtaken by the demand, and I'm concerned that we have closed a review and we haven't actually solved the problem in that demand is outstripping the savings that we're making. So I just wonder whether you had a comment on that, Sam?
Well, I don't think we've closed one action. The recovery plan and work that is going on to try and redress our balance is ongoing. So let's be very clear about that. We've closed one action from the plan, but that's it. The work is ongoing. The work we're doing you know, stems the tide, but it doesn't eat into the historic deficits that we've accrued. It's not really the time and the place to get into that. And I think there is a paper actually going to the Children's Scrutiny Panel, I believe, that explores this further. But for those who are familiar with the topic, it's a bit of a dog's dinner. The legislation, the policy and the funding leave a lot to be desired. We had a head teacher conference recently that I spoke at, and officials there from the DfE were very complimentary about the work we're doing to try and redress the balance. But there's lots of things going against us. Demand, simple lack of funding, and the government's failure to complete the policy review that it signposted years ago now. So we certainly, it remains a key focus of ours to try and do what we can to address the historic deficit that we've got. We certainly, that as a priority is certainly not closed.
Thank you. That's really what I was concerned about. The fact is, I know that it's not necessarily the deficit, it's actually that demand is rising exponentially as we speak for various reasons, which are not really part of this committee. And I was just concerned that we're closing off this action to address the increases of SEND costs. And so if that's not happening, then I'm perfectly content. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members got any further questions? No. Thank you, Sam. I think that's very comprehensive in it, and I know that, you know, it's good to be assured that you're keeping on top of this and updating and reviewing and revisiting. Could you just confirm where, obviously risk is a key part of this committee, the next date that we will be reviewing the strategic risk register on this committee?
Yeah, I can't recall. Can someone remind me in the calendar of meetings when our next meetings are?
We've got one in February and one in April, because I just think we should be having a review of this on make sure that we've got it in on a regular basis, but we can.
April, we normally do it every committee, so April sounds about.
Okay. Yeah.
I've got something else to do in January and February, but I can't think of what that is now, but something's going on. Oh, budget, that's right. Yeah, but April, we normally do it every
yeah, okay, thank you. So we're being, so we'll take this as there's two separate decision recommendations here. We're noting the content of the strategic risk register and the actions that are underway to address the risks. So can I take that, everyone, that we're happy to note that? Yes, thank you. And then we'll move on to the second part of the paper. And if you'd like to talk through that, thank you.
Yeah. So the second part of the paper, we asked, we are going to at some point refresh our risk management strategy and policy. We asked Rachel to take a look at our risk management arrangements and report back. The report you have in front of you. Clearly, with workload and everything, I think the key issue is that with workload and everything else, the structure of risk management in the organisation beyond the strategic risk register needs work. I think the challenge, I think that is generally accepted for now. I would say for now is a key point there. So I think when we discussed that at SMT, there was agreement that we should have something in place at a directorate level, which we don't, certainly not up to date. I think the concern was the concern was having some support to be able to do that. And one of the things that's highlighted in Rachel's report is most other organisations do have corporate resource focused on risk management. We don't. Rachel does provide, her team provides some support to other organisations, and she's happy to do that for us. And I think that's an offer that we as SMT we're very grateful for, because it's not so much, let's be very clear, Rachel can't identify the risks for us. She can't tell us how we're going to manage them. But so it's not about that. but it's about providing that support and challenge to teams who may be less comfortable with the topic, because we need a quality product coming out of it, quite frankly. So I think there's a recognition from SMT and a commitment to do risk registers at a directorate level, and we want to take up the offer of support that Rachel has kindly given. Really, if the committee has well, it'd be interesting to see what the committee thinks of that position. And I'm going to say for now, because there's probably something I want to say once we've had this debate. But yes, over to you, really, in terms of what's your perspective on the suggestion, the proposal that we've come up with.
Okay, thank you. I wonder whether it's just worth, because we're being, there's a few things actually. I'll just ask Rachel if you would like to say anything at this point about the internal audit report on risk management and the proposal before we then open it up for questions from members.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I think obviously you have a full copy of the internal audit report, and I think it's useful for this committee to see that, actually, because with risk management being one of your responsibilities, I think it's useful for you to see the full detail on that anyway. So obviously the assurance ratings that we've given highlight that there's not a significant gap. It's not that risk management's been overlooked at the authority. There's processes in place. The corporate risk register, as we've just discussed, is clearly a living document. I suppose it's that facilitation, having that resource there to support this on an ongoing basis, to make sure that we've also got some risk registers at a lower level that underpin that corporate risk register, and facilitating that. And I think it's important what Sav mentioned earlier, that if internal audit were to support with this going forward, we would be facilitating risk management. We would not be responsible for it. And I think that's again important for you as a committee to know, that I would remain independent of the risk management process and the outputs of that, the risks that are identified and the scores that are given to it. But we would be given an independent resource to facilitate the process that's been defined. So hopefully that helps to just give a little bit extra comment on that.
Thank you. Just to clarify, you're being, from this committee's point of view, we're being asked to note that and the proposed response, and but there is a proposal here that internal audit spends an extra 15 days on facilitating and supporting the risk management process, which would mean that actually there would be 15 days less spent on other internal audit activities. But surely this committee needs to approve the internal audit plan. So I'm just wondering why it's come for noting rather than actually to approve that change to the plan.
Because
I'd have thought we need to actually approve the plan, which we will do. I
think you've answered
after Christmas. Sorry,
you've answered your own question, Chair. Actually, you will approve the plan after Christmas.
Okay.
Clearly, if you're supportive of the proposal, Rachel will include that in the plan if you approve.
Okay, that was to clarify the exact procedure. Yes. So nothing's been okay, right. So this is a proposal to be included within the plan if members are broadly supportive.
Indeed.
And therefore there would be some consideration of what else we were going to lose, which might have been in the audit plan. Is that, sorry, that's a question for that statement.
Yes,
Yes,
that is the case.
Which I think members need to be clear about what we wouldn't do if we actually go with this suggestion. Rachel, do you want to come in there?
I thought I'd just comment on that, Chair. So when I've actually mentioned in my next paper this evening that we're starting the audit planning process, and obviously that then leads to the draft audit plan coming to this committee in March. And when I present that plan, what I usually do is also present a list of, we almost call them reserve topics, of the ones that didn't quite make the cut onto the internal audit plan. So that will give the committee some oversight of what would have been on the plan if the risk management or indeed any of the other assignments hadn't been on there, just so that you can see the assignments that didn't quite make the cut onto the plan. So hopefully that will give you some some insight into that at that point.
Okay, thank you. So open this second part of this report up to members for questions. Does anyone got any specific questions on this? Sorry, you could keep moving around the screen. Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you very much, Councillor Powell. I can't help but support, the motions that are actually being proposed about the creating a strategic and director risk registers. My concern stems from the fact of the increased pressures that are going to be put on each individual directorships, and in particular, I'm thinking about adults and places, especially as they seem to be suffering from at the moment a 10% reduction, roughly, in staffing levels. So I'm just concerned about, and I'm wondering whether perhaps we ought to debate whether the benefits of actually getting somebody in, a specialist in, to actually looking at the risk registers in general, because it just seems to me that we do have significant problems with staffing levels, not significant, but problems. And if we're going to increase the number of registers, and particularly the directorship level registers, that would increase the workload on the actual directorship, some of which are struggling to keep up because of the lack of staff.
Thank you. Sab, do you want to come back on that particular?
Well, let's take the other comments, Chair, if you don't mind, and then I'll make some general observations.
Okay.
There might be some similar comments.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Hi, Chair. I've got a number of comments to make. Again, with Councillor Ainsley, I agree with the concept of supporting director level risk registers. I think that's critical. And in no particular order, I'm going to make some points. I'm disappointed to see that not all job descriptions had risk management responsibilities in them at senior level. I presume that's an action that SMT have taken away to get that updated. I am concerned about the 15 days coming out of the audit plan. I can understand initially some time required to assist directorate level to establish the risk registers, but thereafter, in my view, risk management is very much about the day-to-day management as much as anything. In other words, when you're looking at your management activity, then risk is what you're looking at as much as anything else, as much as performance management. So it's a managerial responsibility. I believe very strongly on that. Looking at the number of days on page 41 on the table of the other authorities, I note that LA3 has both strategic and directorate level activity on risk register, and they take 24 days. We currently have strategic, directorate, which we don't do in 2 areas, and fraud. We take 35 days. So I just look at that and go, well, what's the reason for that? Why can they do it for 24 days on 2 registers and we take 35 days on 2 1/4 registers? So that's a question there. The other point is on risk management. We've only been one alternative. And the alternative is that we take it out of the internal audit plan. From my own personal experience, I've been involved in risk management quite extensively in the last probably 30 years. And I brought risk management into Wilco, and I brought it in initially by sharing it with health and safety. So I brought in somebody to look after risk management who also could handle a health and safety role. And we have a health and safety person. I just wonder whether there's an opportunity there to have some support for the directorate roles through that route. And remembering that I had one risk manager ultimately at Wilco for 24,000 employees, 270 sites. I'm concerned about the extent to which we need the number of bodies we do, potentially the number of days we do. And then finally, on the internal audit work plan, I think when we come to it, I think I would suggest strongly that, to you, Chair, that we have an informal meeting sometime between now and the next meeting to talk about the plan. And I think when we come to the report from Rachel later this evening, some other items I'll bring up at that time, we can also discuss then. So I'm saying yes, I think we should have directorate level. I'm not overly supportful of the 15 days per year, and I just wonder if there's any other routes as well.
Thank you. Councillor McCartney, and then we can tackle these various items all together.
Thank you. I've got two things really, both of which Gordon's just mentioned. One is that I like the idea of director level risk registers. I find them really useful at work, and they fit in nicely with auditing. And if they're living documents and you're always on top of them, then you actually find things in there that you think, actually I had forgotten about that, we need to come back to that. It's a really good way of keeping things moving and not getting forgotten. So I'm really supportive of that. And the other thing is that I know that when our external auditors come around, if I said I'd chop 15 days out of internal audit, I would be met with some very raised eyebrows, and I would have to explain myself pretty convincingly how I'd managed to mitigate getting rid of that amount of internal auditing, because internal auditing does add value. And so I've just got a question about how exactly do we feel we have sufficiently mitigated the loss of those 15 days?
Thank you. Can I just add again, and I think getting the feel of this committee that actually that supportive of having risk registers at that directorate level, that is part of, you know, that director responsibility. And my concern is a bit similar really, that to facilitate getting those done is one thing, but we need the way of making sure that they become part of what the directorates do, and we don't put them on a shelf and then forget about them, and then we have more time and investment is needed in the future. So is the 15 days to get them done in the first place in terms of support, or what are we thinking about, and then no ongoing, or is it you know, to make sure that that does become an embedded part of operations? How will that work? So Sav, back to you for those various points, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Okay. Well, and I can't remember the order of events, but no. I mean, clearly SMT are committed to producing directorate risk registers. I think everybody agrees with that, so yeah. Take it as a given. I have managed to persuade Zurich Municipal to come in and facilitate the creation of risk registers for free. So
sorry, who was that?
Zurich Municipal, our insurers. They often come and look at our arrangements, because if they understand what you're doing in relation to risk, it helps them assess how that plays into insurance. So I've managed to secure free resource to help create risk registers in the first instance. Rachel's team will not be doing that, because we will aim to do that in time for April. Rachel's team will be helping to create and maintain them. I think there's a slight misunderstanding. Rachel is not providing administrative support.
No.
Be clear about this. Actually, Rachel's input to risk management helps her as part of her deriving an opinion on our arrangements, because she's closer to the action. She will understand, if she attends my DMT, she'll understand what our thinking is. She understands our attitude to risk. She understands how we talk about it, how we make it feel in practice. So the idea that I'm very disappointed that members feel it's 15 days wasted, because it's not, because it does contribute to Rachel's understanding of risk. You'll be able to have a private meeting with her and talk about how directorate teams talk about risk. it's equally as valuable as any internal audit report you receive. Maybe that isn't explained sufficiently in the report, and that's my fault for that. But I know from the work that Rachel does, that insight tells her a lot, because you get more of a sense of, have they just put this piece of paper together? Rachel knows, because she attended our business grants risk exercises. We're not passive in those meetings. We actively talk about risk. We consider different options. And she'll get an insight into that when we create and maintain the registers. So that is a valuable part of the work. The other thing to note from Rachel's perspective, and she'll talk for herself in a moment, if Rachel was Rachel has to deliver an audit opinion. Rachel has to do sufficient work to deliver that audit opinion. What she is saying is that replacing an audit assignment with this work does not detract from her ability to give an audit opinion. And I would never ask her to reduce the days to the point where she can't give an opinion. That would be wrong, and then the committee should not support that. That's not what we're saying in this instance. We're saying that the work diverted to risk will contribute to the giving of that opinion. So from an SMT's point of view, we do feel we need that independent expertise and support. We have looked at whether we could, the health and safety officer is not the right person to support us on this, and neither do they have capacity to do so. But we have considered other options. But the simple reality is, other than ask for more resource in the budget, which I'd rather not do, I certainly don't want to do, we felt that we did need some corporate resource to help. That's why we've made the request. If the committee is not supportive of that, I'll go back to SMT and we'll have to have a think again. But yeah, that's, I hope I've answered most of the issues that were raised.
So I'm just referring to my notes of what, yeah, as I say, this committee seems to be broadly supportive of the director's risk and appreciates that actually there are resource implications. I wonder if, Rachel, you would like to come in now before I take further questions on that. And can you just for clarification, really, your and sort of the allocation of your sort of resources to address this, specific issue. So, but this would be a one-off for this year. Is this what you're saying? Can you perhaps just clarify that as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Sorry, did you want me to take that, respond to that?
Yes, please. And
yes.
Also, if you've got anything else to add to what Sav has said from your perspective. Thank you.
Yes. So thank you, Jess. So as Sav said, at year end, effectively, as members of the committee will be aware, I have to give an opinion over the council's governance, risk and control framework. So that's based on the work that internal audit do during the year. And I'm comfortable that if we were to facilitate risk management, that would be a way of adding towards my bank of assurances, I suppose, that informs that opinion at year end. So I don't feel in any way that would be wasted time, and that's something that would enable us to inform the audit work that we do as well, and inform that opinion effectively at year end. So we almost have a bit of an oversight over risk management whilst not being engaged in it. In terms of identifying the risks, we have a little bit more of an insight into how it operates. So I do feel it would add towards my opinion at year end, and it's my responsibility as well as your chief internal auditor, if I felt we didn't have sufficient coverage in the audit plan to inform that opinion, that I would need to raise that to you as well. So that's just my comment on that. I was just going to mention as well, I know that Councillor Brown did raise a comment about one of the figures in the benchmarking, but I thought I might be able to add a little bit of light on. So just in relation to that council that we mentioned that does have other levels of risk register, that was only using 24 days versus the 35 at Rutland. That council actually only reports to their audit committee on their corporate risk register once a year. So if obviously that's a difference at Rutland, you're receiving at least 6 monthly reports on your risk register versus once a year, so that level of resource isn't being applied. They also don't do any reporting on their other risk registers as well, so their review cycle is quite a lot longer than Rutland's. I think that the Rutland risk register is reviewed more regularly and is more of a living document potentially than some of these other councils. That also is a smaller district council, not a full county or unitary council, just to give you some context as well. But I note that it's not necessarily clear from the benchmarking data. So I just thought that would be useful to add, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, just to clarify, and after we all totally realise that Rachel isn't providing administrative support because that's not a good use of her time. When as I say, we're talking the 15 days. So are we seeing that as an ongoing focus of audit work from now on in, that every year? Yeah, is that just to confirm my understanding what the direction of travel is thinking?
For now, that would be the proposal, yes.
Okay, and maybe sorry, Councillor Ainsley, I'll take your question in a minute. Could you just give a couple of examples, Rachel, when you're facilitating, when you say you're facilitating, and it's the risk management and supporting and helping with your oversight? Could you just give us a couple of examples of what type of thing you'd be doing in those 15 days?
Certainly. So some examples of what I do with some other local authorities that we support with this. I will attend the corporate risk group, for example, or meetings with the representatives from the services when they're discussing their entries and scoring them. Just make sure that the risking scoring is in line with what's in the strategy, making sure that they're following the due process. So that we've got consistency, because I think sometimes what you can also have is different approaches adopted within different service areas, and much more risk averse in one area, much more tolerant in another. So you can, once you then pull all of those together, you can not necessarily have an informative picture across the authority. So it's trying to make sure that that consistent approach is applied across the different areas. Also, what we do is also share some examples from other local authorities as well that maybe they haven't thought about, and also if they're, for example, when different authorities were looking at adding a risk around COVID, some of them didn't really know where to start. What do we put on our risk register in relation to COVID? So what I did was share with them some entries from other comparable authorities within my client base as to how they'd rated what the risks are and how they'd scored the impact and the likelihoods. Just to give them a little bit of context and a little bit of insight as how to, because a lot of other authorities are no doubt dealing with similar risks in most of these areas. So sometimes that's useful to give a little bit of, share a bit of feedback. It's obviously then for them to determine what risk they do apply, what scorings they do put in place, but at least it's informing that decision making a little bit more.
Okay, thank you. Just sorry for clarification, then I will let Councillor Ainsley ask his question. The corporate risk group, can you just clarify who's on that?
Well, I don't believe, I'll be corrected by Sab, but I don't believe there is a corporate risk group at Rutland at the moment. That's the sort of...
Oh, sorry, you mentioned that.
Yeah, so that's something that the equivalent at Rutland might be meeting with all of the service leads, for example, who represent the different services and who are responsible for the risk registers. So it's a term that I've used to elsewhere, but not something that's directly Rutland applicable.
Is that correct, Sav? Yeah. So it's basically that would be with the directorate group. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. No. Thank you, Councillor Ainsley. Sorry for you having your hand up for so long before asking your question.
Yeah. Luckily, I'd written it down, so otherwise I'd have forgotten. I do understand that you managed to get some help from Zurich, and that's really great to actually get these risk registers established. I also understand that Rachel's going to be assisting with the 15 days to actually support the managed process. However, it doesn't really give me any reassurance regarding the additional workload on the two directorships. And I'm thinking primarily at the moment of place and adults, who would have to undertake a fairly sizable chunk of of time to actually manage the whole process of the risk register. I'm just wondering whether you can provide some assurance to me that we, or to the committee, I should say, that that you do believe that these directors at the moment have not maintained anything with a risk register would be able to do so without any additional help.
Thank you. Sav, are you able to come back on that specific point about the support, the additional staffing support to those directorates?
Well, yes, I mean, as I said, SMT and the directors are committed to having directorate risk registers. We think they're very important. If anything, they might shine a light on areas where we've got problems. So we are committed to doing it. The reason we've asked for support from Rachel is because those directorates that, for example, Councillor Ainsley may be concerned about, need the type of support that Rachel's just described. So we're committed to doing it. We'd just like a little bit of help. That's all.
I perfectly understand that it's committed to it, and I really welcome the change, and I really welcome the fact we got additional help from Rachel and from Zurich. But I am genuinely concerned about the increased workload on those directorships that at the moment are not being able to maintain any kind of risk register. And I think the two that are highlighted in the report, and I can't find the pages, I looked for them. And I just wondered whether, but at the moment you don't see that that's necessary. You believe that they can actually work through and be able to support the risk registers once they've been established and maintain them.
All I can simply say is when we held a conversation about the audit report that Rachel produced at SMT, and I put the question to SMT around what's our view of risk registers at director level, there was no pushback. There was unanimous agreement that we should have them.
Okay.
The directors that you are concerned about, except with all of the challenges and difficulties it might be, that we need to have them.
Yeah, I agree. We do need to have them, and if you have that confidence, then that's fine. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm not saying I've got the confidence. I'm saying that we all agree that it's the right thing to do.
We do. Yes, we absolutely do.
Thank you, everybody. Just to be so we're being asked to note this. Just to be clear, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. One of the in 3.3.2 is the senior management team have agreed to have those risk registers in place by the end of the financial year.
That's the plan.
That's the plan. But Rachel, the internal audit would get involved from the next audit plan. Is that what we're saying, from the start of next financial year?
Correct.
Okay, so there wouldn't be any work done by internal audit during this financial year. So this is the Zurich and the director. Okay, I think that wasn't totally clear in that report. That's why I got, were we noting it or were we actually agreeing?
Well, subsequent to writing the report, I've agreed to free resource from Zurich.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so we're being asked to, everyone happy to know, I think obviously from the discussion, and it's been really helpful to expand on exactly, what's entailed, and obviously SMT have thought through this, and I would say this committee is fully supportive of having those risk registers in place, and well done for securing some free resource to actually get those done. We will obviously look at the internal audit plan for next year as a separate thing. I'm picking up from committee members that broadly supported but very aware of the amount of days and how that affects other issues in the audit plan, but take on board obviously Rachel's assurance of the help it gives to her opinion, etc. We will have a separate meeting on the internal audit plan. So maybe I would just maybe, if the committee is happy to note that, but just perhaps for Sav and Rachel to just have a little additional, perhaps not total rethink, but just in between now and when we review the plan, to just have a review of anything that actually might be a different focus changed.
Can I be clear?
Yeah.
Are the committee supportive of the 15 days or not? Because I want to go back to SMT and say, committee want us to have directorate risk registers, but they want you to get on with it and not have the additional support, or they're happy to make the support available. I would like to be clear to my colleagues what the committee is agreeing. Whichever way you go, that is your choice. I would just like to be clear.
So you are asking us for a decision then, not to just note the recommendation?
Well, clearly the formal sign, you can't sign off the audit plan for next year now.
No.
But I would hope that you'd feel sufficiently able to give me a steer as to whether you're minded to support what we're suggesting, or you're simply saying, get on and do that extra work with the resources you've got. That's all I'm asking.
So whether we're supportive of the principle of using capacity in internal audit
Exactly.
to actually support that risk register.
Exactly.
I personally would say that the risk register at that level is vital, and we need to support it. And I think in broad terms, I would support the use of internal audit. I have the 15 days seems like a lot to me to take out of other resources. That's this is my personal view. I would like to know what other members of the committee think. Any hands, or would you just like to, just so I can get a Paul? Sorry, Councillor Ainsley.
Yeah, I think that the way it was described by Rachel, and I think it's part of the education process, I think it's part of the formation process, and I think circa 15 days, after all, it is circa 15 days, isn't it? Exactly, it could be less. I think I am in support of that 3.4.2.
Thank you. Councillor McCartney.
I think you said it yourself, Sab. The initial report probably wasn't quite clear enough on what mitigation was put in against those 15 days going elsewhere, and the value that was being placed on them was effectively replacing the value that we felt perhaps had been lost elsewhere in internal audit. So I think I think I'm more comfortable with that now.
Thank you. Councillor Beggy.
Just reiterating that, I think Rachel has clarified a few of those points, and I think we have to at this point be supportive of the recommendation because it is so vital.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
I'm not going to be as gung-ho as that. I definitely would like to see just exactly what we're doing next year and the way that we're spending the time that we have. We've got 360 days typically. Is that going to be the case next year? Is that what you're proposing in the budget next year, Sav? Or Karen? I'm not too sure.
Unless it's an area that we target for savings, because we are.
I don't know. I don't know whether it is an area we're targeting.
No.
That's why at this stage it's difficult to say if we're going to knock back the 360 days something else, then that puts a different complexion on it, and therefore that's why I'm a bit cautious about being absolutely clear with you this evening. I note your points. Thank you for your explanations on the points I made. I have reservations.
Thank you. So can I, and I think that's sort of what my view was at the beginning. I think, am I right in summing up then from the committee's point, we are broadly supportive, but we have a few concerns about the impacts that might have on other aspects of internal audit. So is it we're happy to say that we're broadly supportive of that? Is that okay, Sav?
Yes, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
And then we will review the audit plan when we look at that in more detail.
Yes.
Is everyone happy with that statement? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. The only other right, I think that brings to an end those reports. I just wanted to I'm not sure it actually comes under. There was a question raised by Councillor Brown actually about implications of the new SIPFA guidelines, which has been passed on to Sav. I wonder if you could just confirm the position on that and any implications that would have for us. Explain what it is on our borrowing to invest. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it will sit for his consulting at the moment on the Prudential Code and on the Treasury Management Code, and in line with things that the government have been saying for some time, SIPFA is suggesting that authorities should not borrow to invest or borrow to make money, basically, in that sense. I have to say, it's been met with, there's quite a lot of fury about it in the trade press. A lot of authorities are not happy with SIPFA for going down this route. I think they think there's an issue around, obviously, with local authority funding being reduced so much, authorities feel that they should have more powers to invest, because effectively where the profits go, they go into delivering local services. Well, that's if you generate profits, they do. Now, so the guidance isn't final. What's my perspective on it? I'm quite cautious. My view is that in the new policy, I will not be advocating that we borrow to invest. Sorry, we won't be borrowing primarily for investment purposes. I would be happy for us to consider. So, for example, if somebody said to me, "Oh, let's build a care home in Rutland because we've got no care home provision," then I would happily look at that as an option, because I don't think it's about necessarily pure commercial return, because it is about sort of trying to have some local provision. So I would happily have us consider borrowing where it serves more than one purpose. But if you said to me, let's borrow to, you know, go and buy a hotel in Edinburgh, I'd say no, would be my view. And that's the line that I would consider. But if it was, I mean, this might be a very poor example given where we're at, but if somebody said to me, should we borrow to build a leisure centre? And we did due diligence that told us we're going to make £100,000 a month, I'd be saying, yeah, let's do it. But clearly, you know, to get local provision, but also to get the return. So I think that's my take on it, but I'm quite cautious. I don't like some of the deals that authorities have done. I think they're quite frankly reckless, a lot of them. And we'll see where SIPFA get to in the guidance, but you don't have to, the guidance won't come into effect until 23-24.
Okay, it was just a heads
soft
up on
launch,
that.
but from my point of view, I will be writing in this year's strategy that we won't be borrowing purely for, you know, commercial return. That is not something we should be doing. And actually, compared to lots of authorities, we don't have the resources. You know, it's not like 100 million from housing stock that we've sold or anything like that. So, you know, that's my view. I'm quite cautious about it. And I think the pandemic has shown why you should be cautious.
Absolutely. No. Thank you very much for the heads up on that. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the original item number 8, which is the internal audit update. We have the report, so that's over to you, Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the latest update on the delivery of the internal audit plan for the current financial year in your usual format that will be familiar to members. So I'll just take you through some of the key sections of the report. So table 1 on pages 4 and 5 of the appendix provide you with a copy of the internal audit plan for the year and the status against each of those assignments. So we're making good progress against the audit plan and we remain on track for delivery of this year's plan. We have a few on there that are year end, so obviously work on those is yet to start because we do need to cover enough of the financial year. So we've not yet made a start on those audits, but where we've been able to, the audit work is underway and further progress has been made since the report was produced as well. So we have a further audit report that has been finalised. Obviously, one of the reports that we've issued has already been discussed in detail this evening in relation to risk management. So following this evening's discussions, that will also become a finalised report. We've also issued the report on contract management, and I don't have any areas of significant weakness or concern to highlight to the committee that would impact upon my audit opinion at this point, based on the work we've completed. So as I say, the table shows all of the assignments, the status and the outcomes of those that have been delivered, and we'll continue to report to you on that progress at the next meeting. In terms of the implementation of audit recommendations, I've got a very positive report really for the committee this evening. So in Appendix B to the report on page 9, there's an overview of the implementation rates of internal audit recommendations since the last meeting. So as members will note from the report, we have 8 actions which were confirmed as completed since the last meeting, and only 1 audit recommendation which remained overdue. And I'm also pleased to inform the committee that this has now been completed. So we actually have no remaining overdue audit recommendations to report to you. So I think that's a really positive position to be in. And I'm pleased that I will no longer have to report the highways maintenance actions to the committee, and I'm pleased to not have to include them in future reports.
We're very pleased about that as well.
It's refreshing. But on that note, I would just like to reassure the committee, obviously we have now marked those actions as completed, but what I would propose we do is review the contract again at some point, just to ensure that compliance has been fully implemented and that it's effective. So we'll follow that up further with testing in future years, just to make sure contracts are being managed effectively. So I've also included in the report an update as requested at the last meeting on the implementation of actions from the payments to early years providers audit, which was completed earlier this financial year. And as members will note from the report, I was able to confirm that all of those actions have been completed and there are no actions that remain open or indeed overdue at this point. So again, a positive outcome to report on that. So I think those are the key sections of the report in terms of progress. As we have again mentioned earlier this evening, we are also entering the phase now, believe it or not, when we are starting to look at the next financial year and our audit coverage for 22-23. So I just wanted to bring this to members' attention at this point. I will bring a report to the next meeting, formally engaging the committee and consulting you on areas for potential coverage, and hopefully with an initial list of areas that we've identified through our early horizon scanning as well. But I just wanted to give the early heads up that we will be looking to consult members of the committee, so you can be giving some thought to any areas that you would like us to consider for audit coverage in the next financial year. So that's a brief run through of the report, but I'm happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Just for clarification then, in terms of suggestions for areas for the next audit year, are you opening that up to members of this committee now, or are you saying you're going to do a report first? Sorry, I wasn't quite clear of the timing here.
I'm happy to take comments at any point, really, if there's any early suggestions. But as I say, I will formally invite suggestions at the next meeting. But to be thinking about that in the meantime, any initial areas, obviously, we can feed into that horizon scanning from now. But I would be looking to have any suggestions by the end of, well, early February, mid-February, to make sure that we can feed that into the audit planning process. But I will cover the audit planning process a little bit more at the next meeting as well.
Thank you. Any comments on Rachel's report from members? No, is that a shake of heads? I think it's all very comprehensive and really good work from Rachel and from the the directors to have got those some of those outstanding points.
Gordon has a comment.
Councillor McCartney, sorry.
Sorry, Gordon has a comment, Chair.
Thank you, Gordon Brown. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm delighted that we've got the highways away. That's really good news, and also the early payments ones have been followed up, and the documentation is now being managed effectively. The only question I've got is looking at the position on the report, and I'm not too sure just exactly when the report was written, therefore it's difficult to make sure, but we've used 165 days out of the 360 so far, 200 more effectively to go, and I'm reckoning we're about 2/3 of the way through the year. I'm just worried whether we got enough time left or capacity to actually use all those days between now and the year end, and if not, what's liable to drift between now and the year end in terms of the particular assignments you've got.
Through you, Chair.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Rachel.
Sorry.
to confirm on that. So as I mentioned, there are a number of assignments we do have to deliver in the last quarter, which does tend to skew the figures a little bit as we get to this point in the year, because we do have to complete those financial systems audits in Q4, really, because I like to cover a good chunk of the financial year if we can. So I remain comfortable that we're on track for delivery. I think it's one of the benefits actually that you're in an internal audit consortium of sorts in terms of the delegated service, that we actually have the ability to flex those resources a little bit more during the year. So where I may have had other people working on assignments at other sites, I can bring more people over to work on Rutland for those key financial audits at year end. So I'm happy to give the assurance that we remain on track, and I don't foresee any drift in the delivery at this point.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah, that's very useful. And I think just the one on asset management, given we heard today the Director of Places updating us on the asset review, is it appropriate that asset management one is in this year, given the report's going to be coming in the first quarter? I'm just not too sure what the asset management audit is going to be, given that we're about to go through we've just been through a major, or finalising a major review.
So through you, Chair, in terms of what we would plan to cover in the asset management review, I'd usually split that into two sections. The first in relation to looking at our corporate property portfolio and looking particularly at statutory inspection regimes, making sure we've got the right compliance in place for, gas safety, electrical installations, and all of these things, that we've got a regime in place that we're making sure those properties are safe and legal from that perspective. We'd also then look at any commercial properties, looking at leases that we have in place for those and how we're managing that tenant relationship to make sure that that's operating effectively as well. So it's usually those two elements. What I would suggest, and as you say, when we've got these developments in place, we might want to review how we're making use of those days. I do have a regular meeting with the Director of Place where we discuss upcoming audit assignments and the timing of those, and I'm happy to reflect on the comments of the committee and see whether or not this is the right timing for that piece of work, or whether there would be any value in looking to coordinate with the further work that's underway in terms of the asset review. So I'm happy to take that away if that's helpful.
Thank you. I think that's a useful and good recommendation. Thank you. Councillor Brown, are you happy with that? Any further questions?
I'm happier with it, the asset management.
Yeah.
In respect of statutory and leases, I think that's a very valid point, and it doesn't affect the review at all. So that's clarity, and thank you for that, Rachel.
Did you have another question, Councillor Brown?
Oh, sorry, that was all. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else got any questions on the internal audit report? No. Thank you very much, Rachel, for comprehensive report, and this committee happy to note your report, and I'd encourage members to start thinking about if there is anything that you feel that should be in the audit plan, or any initial thoughts on that to suggest or start thinking, and we will arrange obviously a meeting next year to actually have a bit of a follow-up discussion on the internal audit plan. Thank you. So we're now on to original item number 10, the internal audit delegation, which is back to oh, sorry, Rachel.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to add, I'm happy to leave the meeting at this point. I just thought it was probably more appropriate if I leave the meeting at this point, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. No, good point. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time. Good evening.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So over to Sav. So this is in terms of the structure of the arrangements for internal audit.
Yeah. So our internal audit service is delegated to what was local government shared service. There's two issues really. The initial agreement, there's an argument about whether the initial agreement is coming to an end or not. It can be looked at two ways, but let's assume it is. The initial agreement was for period of 5 years, and it's coming to an end, and the issue is whether we should extend that agreement or not. At the same time, the original delegation was to Milton Keynes and other councils, and that because of the reconfiguration of what's happening in Northamptonshire, or what has happened in Northamptonshire, and other changes, the delegation is being shifted from one council to Northamptonshire Council. So looking at the two issues separately, if the delegation agreement, are we happy for the to continue using Rachel and team? My view is, certainly the officer view is, that we are happy to do that. We get good service. It's low cost relative to the other options that we could have in place, and we've had some of those other options in place in the past. So we would like to extend. The issue is, should we extend, given that the hosting arrangements is changing? I've spoken to my counterpart at Northamptonshire Council, and I'm very comfortable with what they're proposing and the way they want to work with Rachel. In fact, they're going to give her more autonomy and give her more flexibility to run the service how she wishes, which was something I'm supportive of. So in a nutshell, we have a decision to make about whether we're happy with our current arrangement and want to extend it. My view is that well, certainly I'm happy, and I think we should extend it, and that's the view of officers, but clearly the audit committee may have different views.
Thank you. Can I just be clear on the terminology? So the current contract, whatever we're calling it, delegation,
Yeah,
that entity will no longer exist from April 22.
some of the delegation was owned by a number of entities. Some of them don't want it, some of them don't exist. So the reality is it will go to Northamptonshire, who do want it.
Okay, so are we actually extending the agreement, or are we creating a new agreement with a new?
We're extending it, but we'll change the names of the hosts to be the new hosts in effect.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Beggy.
In effect, it's a new agreement. If you feel more comfortable with it, it's a new agreement, but it will be exactly the same in terms of the words, other than the hosts. The host councils will be different.
Okay, and I'm sure it's not for me to ask that actually that within our sort of contracts and everything, we that's totally allowed to do it, even though it's changed its identity as a.
Well, we will ask. Let me talk to Maria about this, but we'll ask Cabinet to effectively give me authority to enter into a new delegated agreement with the new host.
Okay.
So I certainly wouldn't do anything that we don't have the powers.
Oh, no. I know you wouldn't, but just for my own clarification. So it would actually go to, the endorsement is to this committee's endorsement recommendation to council, but you say that it would go to Cabinet first?
So sorry, I can't see my report on the screen at the same time. So if it says council, it's council, therefore. But it'll go to it'll go to a decision-making body, be it council or Cabinet, in course.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Beggy, a question before I tie myself in more knots about the procedure.
Thank you, Sav. Chair, sorry, and Sav, thank you. Just a couple of questions basically around, ironically, risk attached to this decision, only because I come across Northamptonshire in other capacities. The service they provide is really only as good as the team that is employed to do it. What recourse do we have if, for example, Rachel decided to leave that team? Would we have an opportunity to review the service that we're offered? Because part of what you've said is because you're happy with the service that Rachel provides.
Yeah, we could take the delegation agreement back and then we'd spend a lot more money putting another arrangement in place. But yeah, we could take the delegation agreement back. Just like we did with Peterborough, with legal, with other areas. If you're unhappy with the service, we're certainly not tied in.
No, that was my question. Also,
Yeah,
that you would
yeah, we're not tied in. Yeah, we're not tied in.
but I'm just wary about other things that I've seen with Northants. And you believe Northants are in a stable position, that's not going to create a risk for us either.
Well, they had a choice about whether they wanted to inherit the arrangement. So Rachel's little unit that they had the option of inheriting that or not, and they've chosen to do so. And in my conversation with their Section 151 officer, I understand exactly why they've chosen to do so. And to me, they are committed to it.
That's fine. All I wanted was your assurance, Sam. That's good enough for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Brown.
Just a similar one to Councillor Beggy's, actually. You talked about the risk of losing Rachel. The other question is, we talked about this team moving to Northants. Is that the same capacity? Because we were talking earlier this evening about capacity to do your work at the year end. Is that the same capacity she'll have, or with Cambridge and Milton Keynes going out and West Northants going out, are we losing part of that team that she could call on?
Is the team she uses now, but they're actually building in more capacity.
Good. Okay, that's fine. Lovely.
Thank you. Can I just ask about cost then? Obviously, you put some estimates of other options and the cost of our current arrangement. So the extension of that, will that then be a new agreement on costs?
My conversation with the Section 151 officer in Northants is that we will simply go with the current cost arrangement that we have, which increases every year by RPI inflation. But yeah, there's no suggestion that they want to see a step change in the cost, for example.
Okay, and then are we doing it on a year by year basis then? We're not saying we're tying in for 5 years in principle, but then we have an opt out.
That's got to be determined, but my preference is to tie in for a longer period of time, but to have a get out clause that gives us freedom to leave with reasonable notice. And
your expectation is by tying in, we would agree as in line with the current costs, and then possibly an RPI indexation each year.
Yeah, my view is, as long as the service remains good, and that always has to be the measure, then to me it's the best option that keeps our costs low. And I'm mindful of that, very mindful. An alternative would be, I was talking to a colleague today who's a partner at one of the bigger firms, and they're charging 850 quid a day for internal audit work. Well, our rates are significantly lower than that, shall we say. The rates out there in the audit community are frightening because the regulators are strengthening. There are new rules in place that allow auditors to do some things and not other things, that mean all of the rates are going up substantially. So I'm be very nervous about that. And so I'm nervous about using a firm. And the idea of reversing the provision so it's back in-house is one that would see me depart the council in about 30 seconds, I think. We were there before, and it was totally unmanageable and cost significantly more. The best thing, one of the best things about the provision we got is that there is no staff management from my perspective. Professional, contractual, it's not a contract, but contractual relationship with Rachel, but there isn't staff management.
No,
I think that was very resource hungry when we had it in house. And in fact, to Councillor Brown's question earlier, we never delivered an audit plan. Ever.
Okay. No, certainly, I see this service working very well, and I can see the other options are considerably more costly. My question was around actually, you know, our current arrangement costs, is that going to get a lot more costly? But from what you said, hopefully that.
I couldn't, you know, given what's happening, I mean, it's interesting. We've got lots of arrangements with lots of different local authorities, actually, a lot. And part of me doesn't understand why, well, yeah, all authorities are under cost pressure. So, you know, I don't want to say what, you know, it's logical, isn't it? If when you're under cost pressure, you look to recover some of that cost. It's still less cost than what we might ordinarily face through different options. So, you know, I was eager to understand what the basis of what they were thinking about cost, and I've got some assurances on that.
No, that's helpful.
So I was happy about that.
Yeah.
I was sort of expecting well, there'll be a 15% uplift and then it'll be RPI, but there was none of that.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other comments from members? No, thank you. So the recommendation is, the recommendation is that Audit and Risk Committee endorses the recommendation to Council to transfer the internal audit delegation agreement from the existing hosts, Milton Keynes, Northamptonshire and Cambridgeshire, to Northants Council, and to extend the agreement for 5 years. Hopefully we're happy to take both of those as a decision together. Can I have somebody, is somebody happy to propose that? Councillor Beggy, thank you. And to second that? Councillor McCartney, I think was first. That's great. And can I have a show of hands for everyone in favour of that recommendation?
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tom. Okay, that completes our agenda items. Item 11 is any other urgent business. I haven't actually been notified of any other urgent business. Is there anything that anyone else wants to?
I was just going to say, Chair, I will send you an email because I've also arranged that Zurich are going to do a couple of sessions for members on risk management, and I will send you some details, but the idea is that we'll do it virtually. We'll have a couple of sessions and we can invite all members to it for those members who want to attend. They're also doing a similar exercise for staff as well. They're doing 2 sessions for staff as well.
Oh, thank you. No, that was really helpful. Thank you.
So I'll drop you a note on that, and then we'll set some meetings up for the members.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you everybody for attending, and I think we've had some some good reports and some good actual discussions this evening. And as long as there's nothing else, I will declare the meeting closed at 20:37. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good rest of the evening. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Sav.
Bye. See ya.
Bye.